All right, so welcome everyone to the very first Process Optimization Academy session. This is going to be like one of those things you tell your friends you were at the very first one someday, like being at Shea Stadium for the first US-based Beatles concert, or Fenway Park for Carlton Fisk's home run, or some other super cool event that people recognize and relate to that I just didn't think of. Now, the purpose of these sessions are to help us all get better educated on ServiceNow's in-platform process mining capabilities. So we'll provide how-tos, practical guidance and use cases, product updates. And as a group, the idea is just simply to exchange ideas and collaborate so we all continue to get better. So how will these sessions work? We'll have a scheduled topic that we'll cover, usually for the first 30 minutes. Today will be a bit longer probably, since we'll be providing some foundational information as an intro to make sure that we level set everyone. Then we'll open it up for questions on the chosen topic for that session. And then after that, we'll open up for questions above and beyond the day's topic. So as I mentioned earlier, these sessions will be recorded and eventually posted on the community. So if that's a no-no for you at your company, you've been warned. So consider yourself warned there. And then finally, feel free to post your questions. And I said I was going to use the Q&A window, but I clearly set this up wrong. So if you want to post your questions in the chat for today, as we go through, that's great. Often during the sessions, we'll pause and ask for questions when it makes sense. Other times, I may ramble on for a bit and go back and check the chat for questions at the end. You should all be on mute. So if at some point we do pause and ask for questions, just make sure you unmute yourself to ask that question and go back on mute. And I guarantee there will be times when we don't have an answer for your question immediately. But that's part of the purpose of these sessions, is to flush out things that people are interested in understanding better that we just weren't prepared to answer. So in those situations, what we'll do is we're going to follow up and post them to the process optimization community, that same place that you went to register or found the information to register for the session. And then maybe what we'll do is we'll use, for some of the more in-depth ones, we'll use them as a topic for future sessions, which is also something that we'd appreciate if you put in the chat. This is the slide that says anything I say and do here today cannot be held against me in the court of law. It's also the slide that says it as part of these conversations, if we make any forward-looking statements about what may be coming in future releases, you should take them as such, make no decisions based on them because they're always subject to change. And I'm assuming at this point you've read all the fine print. Perfect. So who am I? My name is Dan Grady. I'm an outbound product manager for our in-platform process mining solution, or process optimization. Just a little bit about my background from a ServiceNow perspective. I've been at ServiceNow for about 6 years now, the first 4.5 of which I was focused on our Now Intelligence solutions. So things like performance analytics, predictive intelligence, the virtual agent, those were all things that I focused on helping customers better understand and get the most value out of. And then in the past year, I spent some time on the creator workflows team, which involves helping customers understand how they can use the platform capabilities to create applications above and beyond the out-of-the-box applications that we offer using our low-code tooling, something we call App Engine Studio. And then recently I joined this team of product managers focused on in-platform process mining. And I'm super excited about the opportunity because I think this really rounds out my skills on the platform as it pertains to, let's say, that hyper automation story. And you'll see that as we go through the presentation, the role that process mining plays in hyper automation, or a hyper automation plan, if you will. From an agenda perspective, what we're going to be covering today, and this looks like a lot, but we'll move quickly. As I mentioned earlier, we need to set some foundational information out there as we move forward. So we'll start off just with a little bit of the why and what of in-platform process mining for those that are not familiar. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process for optimizing a workflow. It's much more than just process mining, which is a critical component, but there's an overall process if you think about continual improvement that you'll be going through. Then we'll do a quick demonstration of the Analyst Workbench, which is what you see on the screen here, so you get an understanding of kind of what the end user is going to experience, whether it's the business process owner or the business analyst that will be using the solution. Then we'll transition to getting an understanding of the building blocks that go into creating your model, and we'll create your first process model. And that's going to, by the end of this, you'll have what you need to turn on process optimization at your organization in a subprod instance and build your first model and get going and playing around if you like. At that point, we'll pause, cover any questions that we hadn't got through the session. We'll talk about some additional resources that are available to you above and beyond today, and then we'll touch on the future sessions that are coming. This is something that we'll be running every other Friday. All right, I always like to start sessions like this with a quote, and I thought this one from the great American author Maya Angelou worked really well. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. It's why we're here today, right? To learn from each other, then go back and apply what we've learned and improve. And this quote also aligns to the solution we'll be focusing on in these sessions moving forward, right? Our process optimization solution, which is the brand name we give our in-platform process mining capabilities that automate the process of x-raying our workflows and showing us where and how we can do better for anyone and everyone involved with them. So we'll start with a little process mining 101. So with everything we do, there's a design and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how it should play out, whether that be planning an event like a wedding or these academy sessions, which I will plan better for next time, or a business process at our organization, or even a park. And when you design things, you design for both efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for everyone. For example, if you look at someone designing a park like what's on the screen here, or like Central Park, where I spent a lot of time. I'm from New York. They design it with paths for people to ride a bike on or walk or rollerblade on. They put in a pond maybe so you can take a little rowboat out and paddle around. They put benches in for us to sit on, read a book, and share a story with a friend. And then there's a whole bunch of grassy areas for people to throw down a blanket and have a picnic, or play a game of Scrabble on a Saturday afternoon like my wife and I used to do. Right, so we design to provide the optimal experience for as many people as possible. Unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. And while this new path in reality may be more efficient for those trying to get from point A to point B in this scenario, it certainly doesn't have a positive impact on the experience of my wife and I finding a nice, cozy spot to play our Scrabble game. Same thing plays out with our business processes. Designed for completeness and efficiency, but the reality is that not all the work flowing through the process is taking that designed route, which has a negative impact on the experience that both the end user as well as the people working the process are having. There's a lot of inefficiency inside of it that we can remove. And identifying what is actually happening, what's the truth in our business processes, and then improving them isn't always as easy and obvious as that park example that we showed a little bit earlier. For most of us, the continual improvement process is very manual, time-consuming, expensive. It involves pouring through tons of reports, holding virtual and in-person workshops, maybe hiring third-party consultants to come in, and then ultimately getting alignment on the path to move forward. Right. And at the speed that we're all moving, right, we're all moving at light speed these days. Even when we get through all of that and figure something out and have an idea in our head on how to move forward, so much time has passed that the optimal path forward may have already changed. The good news is with process optimization or in-platform process mining, the opportunity is now there for us to do better. In a few clicks, we're going to be able to expose to relevant stakeholders the reality and truth of their workflows so they can start improving immediately. And this is what you're going to learn today. We're going to learn by the end of today the few clicks that you need to get started. So process optimization can be applied to any process and provides visibility into bottlenecks. It's going to shine a light on redundancies and rework. It's going to point us towards specific automation opportunities that'll ultimately help us accelerate service delivery and optimize experiences. It's going to help us increase automation rates. It's going to help us make decisions around which automations or sometimes people and process adjustments will provide that we can make that will provide the biggest impact. And if you start taking a look at that list of questions, the solution is going to help us answer things like, where are we spending the most time? Which teams and groups are slowing us down? What is the root cause behind some of the delays that we're experiencing? These are questions we all have, and we can now get to those answers in some cases in a matter of minutes. Like I was mentioning earlier, I've spent a number of years in the ServiceNow ecosystem, and these are things that people would see potential opportunities to improve, let's say inside of their performance analytics dashboards. But then that next step of understanding the why behind some of those KPIs that they were seeing wasn't always the easiest thing to get an understanding of. Process mining helps bridge that gap and get us to the why behind some of those KPIs that we're seeing. Now, how does this work? Well, some of you probably already know this, but every record on the platform creates an audit trail, kind of like Hansel and Gretel leaving breadcrumbs. And every time a record is updated, it stores that change in the audit log. And those are typically captured at the task level. These are turned on by default for something, these audit logs are turned on by default for something like 120 tables. So you probably already have the data necessary to get started if you wanted to. And then we have a mining engine that prepares the data, the relevant audit data, and handles all that heavy duty number crunching. And just so you know, that mining engine, that is essentially using the same machine learning infrastructure that things like predictive intelligence use. So very often people start asking questions around performance impact. The fact that we're using that machine learning infrastructure pretty much eliminates any performance impact on the main instance itself as we start doing that. That's a question that typically comes up, so I figured I'd call that out. Now, we've taken the mining process that we've built out here, and we combine that with a growing library of common findings that guide customers to relevant insights through the Process Optimization Analyst Workbench. There are a bunch of pre-built integrations with other platform capabilities like performance analytics, benchmarks, continual improvement, and our predictive intelligence. And that streamlines the mining process and makes the insights to improvement process, which is the important piece, more efficient and complete. Some even like to say closed loop, which is a necessary thing if we're looking to continually improve and not just make this a one-time thing. So if we look at kind of optimizing processes on ServiceNow, you can really break it down into 4 steps or 4 phases: detect, analyze, improve, and monitor, right? You're probably already using some of the platform's detection methods, things like notifications on maybe SLA breaches, or performance analytics dashboards that have thresholds set to the metrics that you deem important to your organization. Or maybe you're even using the spotlight capability of performance analytics to help you identify opportunities or when things are going bump in the night. That's the detect phase. But once you detect something, we move to the analyze phase. And this is where process optimization really dominates, right? With things like visualized process maps, bottleneck, root cause, variation analysis, as well as an integration with automation discovery, which helps it uses machine learning to help identify automation opportunities for your organization. So that's the analyze phase, and we'll dig into that more as we move forward in this presentation. Then once you find something, right, that's where the improvement process starts. The platform is all about improvements, whether we're automating decisions with predictive intelligence solutions or experiences with the virtual agent or manual steps with our in-platform RPA solution. And sometimes maybe the improvement isn't an automation, it's simply just setting up a coaching loop with a team member. Regardless, there's always going to be plenty of opportunity out there to improve the processes in the organization. We just need to identify where those opportunities exist. Then finally, we want to make sure that whatever change we make is tracked, right? This is the monitor phase, and somebody's actually working on it. Very often, I've found over the years, people have found an opportunity to do better, something cool inside of their data that tells them, hey, you want to do this. They go tell somebody in a meeting of some sort, or maybe they send an email and nothing ever happens with that opportunity. And it just kind of goes wasted there. This is where the integration with continual improvement management on the platform helps, right? Because right from the Analyst Workbench, you can create an improvement initiative and make sure that that gets assigned to somebody to follow up on and is tracked over time. And then you use performance analytics to start tracking whether the change that you made is actually having the impact. So detect, analyze, improve, monitor, all 4 aspects in one platform. Closed loop, as some would say. So if we look at this, how these stages play out in, let's say, a throughput example, that could play out across any number of workflows, right? We're always trying to increase the velocity inside of our organizations in terms of how things get done. In the detect phase, we can see maybe a significant increase in resolution times. That's on a performance analytics dashboard or metric of some sort. Then in a single click from Performance Analytics, which is not something that we're going to cover here today, but right from the Analytics Hub, you can drill into a process map for a subset of data. In a single click, we could move over here to this Analyze phase where you'll find the process map, and we may identify that there's assignment group changes that are leading to a significant delay, or there's some sort of ping pong going on. From there, we can decide to use predictive intelligence potentially to improve portions of the triage and assignment process. And then we'd monitor our performance with a metric tracking, maybe let's say first call resolution rate. So all of those things, again, one platform, closed loop type of experience. This throughput time is just one high level example. Across the workflows, there are so many common findings and opportunities, so many inefficiencies that exist inside of our organizations that process mining can help with as part of that analyze step. And what we've started to do is we've packaged these up into content packs, essentially a library of pre-built finding templates to help you get started, whether it be analyzing the performance of different intake channels or vendor performance comparisons, bottlenecks causing SLA breaches, or process conformance issues. But the improvement opportunities are just endless once you start getting regular visibility into the reality of your processes. These are just the top 26 that we found, but we actually now have a list of up to 75 that we've identified through working with customers that we're in the process of packaging up. And here is what is currently in the ITSM process optimization content pack, right? We're continually enhancing these on our own, but I can see a future, right? As the ServiceNow community starts to get more and more familiar with process optimization, I imagine there'll be some who create and share their own sets of common finding rules and inefficiencies for all of us to benefit from. But this ITSM content pack has 4 pre-built continual improvement initiatives, 5 process model definitions already built out, and 13 finding definitions, which are those things that kind of guide customers to areas they should be focusing on, common inefficiencies that are out there. And we'll look a little bit more at these finding definitions a little bit later on. And actually on the schedule, there's a deep dive session just for these finding definitions. Now, if you look across all of the common findings and opportunities, you can boil them down to 3 high-level buckets: speed, productivity, risk removal. So identifying opportunities to eliminate inefficiencies, increase the speed in which things get done. Highlighting manual steps in a process that could in some cases be addressed by automation, or in others, steps in a process that simply could be removed to increase overall productivity. And then providing visibility into process variability, which needs to be controlled and better governed to remove risk for an organization. So what I thought I'd do now is I just do a quick little demonstration of the Analyst Workbench in action, so you get a sense of what the end user experience looks like. And then we'll transition into creating your first model. So let's come over here and find my instance. I'll have to log in again. Jay, while I'm logging in here, I don't know if you saw in the chat, did anything come up in the chat from a question perspective?
Yeah, there is one question by
Sure. What do you got?
So which database will be used for process mining, the instant database or something else like Platho database? And can process mining be used to review slow job transcriptions, scripts, etc.? And what license is needed to install this?
Perfect. So there's a bunch of questions there. How the process works, and you'll see this in action, right, is we extract the data from the audit table for whatever process that we're focused on, and the subset of data that you'll see when we configure it, kind of how we configure that. The relevant data is pulled from the table and then sent off to the machine learning infrastructure to do the heavy number crunching, and then the model is spit back into the instance, and that's what we're using to drive the visualization that you're going to see in a second here. So that's kind of how that process works. From a licensing perspective, today, the current situation is this is available as part of ITSM Enterprise and CSM Enterprise bundles. But we have identified that that might not be, this is something that most customers can get value out of, if not all customers, and we're looking at better ways of packaging that up in the future. So it's something to kind of, if you do have interest, have a conversation with your account executive about. And we can work to find a solution for you guys from a getting it in your hands perspective. And then in terms of the slow jobs and scripting, it depends on kind of where those take place as part of the process. It's not going to go all the way into the individual scripts themselves. This is more at the workflow and process level. But if those scripts are run as part of a process, and you'll see when we get in here, we'll be able to identify the steps in a process, let's say from one activity to another, one state to another, that are the long running states. And as you drill down into those, if there are scripts that kind of are run as part of that, that's we might get some guidance there, but I don't think it's going to go all the way into this, get to the level of granularity that you might be asking about there. All right, now let's take a look here. What I've come to is I've come to my process optimization workspace, which as when you turn on the plugin, this will be enabled for you. This is just one way to get to process optimization, going to the workspace itself. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to open up this project, my incident process optimization project. Inside of here, I've got a number of different tabs that give me information. This first tab is the summary and insights tab. And what this will give me visibility into some high-level metrics that relate to the process that I'm interested in. So in this case here, we're talking about the incident process. So I have key performance indicators around resolution times and first call resolution rate, what happens to be a leading indicator for our resolution times. And then I've got my improvement opportunities. And essentially what these are those finding definitions or rules that I talked about a little bit earlier, some of those pre-packaged inefficiencies that we commonly see. So things like, hey, multi-hop issues, incidents going through one or two or more reassignments. It's a very common thing. What we can do when we do a mining is kind of bundle that those records into it. So in this case, we've mined 22,000 records and 6% of them go through more one hops, and that can just drive customers right into an opportunity to potentially improve. Or slow resolution time. So incidents that took more than 12 hours between work in progress and resolved, or unexpected transitions like incidents going directly to the closed state. That's an area of opportunity or a conformance issue for many organizations. So we pre-package a bunch of these for you per process. And then what we're doing is you have the ability to adjust these, of course, and then create your own findings for the hypotheses that you have in your organization around inefficiencies that you might see. We've got some variation analysis, which will give us visibility into the various routes or routes that the work is taking. So in this case here, for the records that I mined, I've got 3,200 different routes. And then I've got my bottleneck analysis, which focuses in on the individual transitions and the ones that are either high volume or long running. So again, some direction in terms of where I should get started. At any point in time, I can see one of these that is of interest to me and drill right into the workbench itself for just that subset of the data. I'm moving quickly through this today because the next session will focus really on some of the analytical capabilities inside of here and how you can use the interface. But I wanted to get a flavor today of what's possible before we create our first model. Now, if I come over to the Analyst Workbench itself, the first thing that jumps out is that map on the screen there of the process. In this case, we're looking at an incident process that's broken down by our state activities here. I can get some basic model statistics. So as I've mentioned already, we're looking at about 22,000 records. Those 22,000 records have taken about 3,200 different routes. The average duration is about 3 weeks, and the standard deviation is 3 months, which is a lot of variability, which to me means there's a lot of opportunity to improve. Now you're saying to yourself, maybe, Dan, you said 3,200 different routes. It doesn't look like that there. Well, that's because what we do by default is we isolate this down to the top 20% to kind of focus our attention on the areas that potentially will have the biggest impact. But if I wanted to blow this out and look at 75% of the paths, it gets pretty messy pretty fast. And I promise you that anyone on your governance team is going to get pretty scared when they see this much variability inside of a process. So typically we're going to stay at this 20% range, but you have the ability to flux this and see the outliers. The idea though at that 20% is this focuses on the high volume areas, right? Instead of those one-off things that are important to understand, but might not have the biggest impact if we're looking at, say, automation opportunities. As I look at the map, with each one of these transitions, I get a volume metric here. This is total occurrences right now, but potentially I want to add a secondary metric and look at something like velocity of these things moving through each of the hops. So now I'm seeing the ones that are going from, I got 8,400 here, and they're taking on average about 9 hours to move in this state here. Many people say to me, Dan, this is new to a lot of people looking at a map like this or our processes in a map like this, and they're wondering where the opportunity or where should they start. For me, I always like to start on these sections where I see an arrow that's going back up the hill, back up here. I always compare these maps for me. They look like ski trails. And I think back to when I was skiing quite a bit. Anytime I had to go back up the mountain, that was typically a bad experience for me. So I'm always initially looking for arrows that are going back up. And that's usually in the area of rework or an inefficiency that we might be able to focus on. And I can come in here and I can click on any one of the nodes and I can start getting some details about that one specific transition. In this case here, I've got about 2,400 records that moved through that awaiting caller info to in progress node. 18 of them are unique. 1,800 of them are unique. That means to me like there's 500 that have done this, taken this trip more than once, which is a problem. And one of them has even went back and forth at least 6 times or 6 times maximum. And then I get some metrics around the duration of the things that are going through here. And the total duration of 11 years, that's crazy to me. That's a lot of time or productivity that we can gather back potentially if we find a way to automate inside of here. This is just one way to look at this. Another way that I can look at the opportunities to use my bottleneck analysis. And I can come in here and I can find that example in progress to awaiting caller info. I can get the average duration, standard deviation, median duration. But if I look at both of these in combination, my in progress to awaiting caller info and then back to in progress, that total duration, again, it seems kind of crazy, but that's 22 years of productivity that's being trapped in that back and forth where we're looking for additional information. I want to figure out a way to kind of take some of that productivity back. I can do things like isolating that one transition. So I can come in here and I can say, you know what, I only want to focus in on things going through that awaiting caller info node. So I can apply this and that'll focus this down to just that. And now what I've got is I've got about 7,100. So maybe a third of my cases are going to awaiting caller or tickets are going to await a caller info there. And then I can start using things over here on the left. These are my breakdowns. And breakdowns, we'll cover this a little bit further and set these up, but breakdowns are just different ways in which I can filter or analyze the records that I'm looking at right now. So I can break this down by channel, assignment group. Maybe I want to break it down by category or priority. Any structured data that you have the ability to start breaking these records down by inside of your map. And if I start looking at these breakdowns, let's say by channel, which is a very common way to analyze people's data, I can see that the largest amount of my records moving through this awaiting caller info are coming from self-service, and their average duration is 1 week. So you would think that we'd want to start there. But for me, what jumps out is this 2-week average duration of tickets coming in via email. So maybe I want to focus in on just those. And you'd kind of expect that email is a very unstructured channel, right? So you would expect that we're not getting all the information we need right up front. So we might have to go back and forth with the user to get that additional information. So I can focus in on email. And now if I want to just look at these that are coming through awaiting caller info, I can do some additional analysis. We've got built-in root cause. So I can see the leading influencers for just these tickets that are coming in via email that are going to awaiting use. The majority of them, or 21% of them, I should say, are categorized as employee portals. So maybe I want to focus in on just those. And then once I focus in on just those, now I want to get down even further into the details. And I can start using the platform's clustering capability to help me understand the unstructured data inside of those tickets that are coming in via email. So I can start seeing like, hey, there's a large volume of these that have something to do with email and support and stuff like that. Let me just focus in and get down to the records here, which, you know, if you have the rights to do, you can in the platform. And immediately I can see a whole bunch of these have to do with somebody changing their email address as part of their profile, which should be a pretty straightforward thing for us to address with, let's say, a virtual agent conversation or potentially a service catalog offering. Maybe we might even have a service catalog offering already. We just need to market it a little bit better to kind of take advantage or drive some efficiency inside of the organization. So just a real quick demonstration. I wanted you to get a feel for how you could potentially use from an end user perspective, the Analyst Workbench before we went in and created our first project and model together. So you had some understanding of kind of some of the things we'll be setting up, how they translate into the end user experience. All right, swatch back over here to the slide. So kind of what we'll be focused on here, like these are all the different, what I call building blocks of process optimization on the platform. So today, what we're going to focus on is we're just going to focus on those ones at the top, which are really the ones that we need when we're creating a model. And then in future sessions, we'll dive into some of the more analytical pieces there that you see on the list at the bottom. Now, what makes process mining possible is event data. And event data exists for each individual piece of work or record. For example, an incident, case, or request of some sort. And as a piece of work moves through a given process, it creates this event data, with each step it takes. This event data at a minimum is going to have 3 values: a record ID, so which piece of work is it that I'm focused on, an activity, so what's changed about that piece of work, and a timestamp, when did it change. That event data is what is used to visualize what is actually happening within a given process. Now, when it comes to ServiceNow, the event data is stored in the audit table. So turning on audit data collection is a configurable option for each table. As I mentioned earlier, it's turned on for about 120 tables by default. And then if you have the rights to do so, you can go into any record and go up and you view the history. So if you see there in the upper left, you come to an incident, you go down to view history. I like to use the list. The calendar view is a little bit hard to understand, and you can get to the audit history for that record, and kind of you can see that last visual at the bottom there. That's the state transition for the record that we're looking at. That's the data that we're using to create the maps that you're seeing on the screen here, or that we just went through. So that's the data piece. What data we mine is all configured inside of a project. Projects are where we configure the source data and the filters for that data that we want to analyze. And then besides configuring the source data, we also configure a few other important pieces inside of our project, like activities, breakdowns, and child or related tables that we want to map together. So besides the source table, an activity is the most important part of your project. These are the different types of steps that can occur as part of your process. Think state or assignment group changes, which are the most common, but they can also be things like a knowledge article being attached or a task of some sort being created. You're required to have at least 1 activity configured for each project, and you can have up to 10. But as you go through this process, readability of the map is certainly something that you're going to want to consider. I always guide folks to say, you know what, for your first time, maybe just use state as your activity, just to get you comfortable before you start adding other activities there, because readability is really important when you're going through some of these maps. As you saw, they can get kind of crazy kind of fast. Now, you can choose to group a given activity. So this is useful for situations when you don't need to see each individual change for an activity, but you want to know that a certain type of activity took place. So for example, you may be interested to know that assignment group changed, but you don't need to know the details of each individual reassignment. Or you may want to know when a knowledge article was attached, but you don't need to see each individual knowledge article that was potentially attached. So those are activities. We'll configure those. The next piece is your breakdowns, right? As you saw, those breakdowns act as while you were analyzing the map, but they also give you statistical insights into the data, because you saw some of those percentages, and you can start sorting things by volume and velocity inside of there. You're allowed to configure up to 10 breakdowns, and these can either be choice or reference fields. So if you're not overly familiar with the platform, when we say choice and reference fields, think like when you're viewing a form, anything that's a drop-down list or has a little magnifying glass next to it. We don't allow people to create breakdowns on string fields, because that's just poor data. It's just poor data analytics practice. And the question that typically comes up when we say you can have up to 10 breakdowns, breakdowns are the high-level grouping. So channel, assignment group, service, priority, right? So that's there. Inside of that, the number of elements, like so the number of different channels or the number of different assignment groups, there's no real limit on those. But you want to be mindful of kind of what you can consume as a human being and use for analytical purposes. And then specifically when using those breakdowns on reference fields, you have the option to filter the breakdown. So let's say you want to create a breakdown on location or assignment group, or maybe even configuration item, but you want to focus those breakdowns in a certain area. You can add filter conditions to the breakdown values to make sure that they're a little bit more focused. So those are the building blocks, or the things that you need to understand for us to go and create our first project. So let's go create our first project. And then once we do that, we'll pause. I see some things in the chat, some questions that we might want to answer. So we're going to come in here and we're going to create a new project. And I think this is a super powerful piece. This ease of use of getting us from data to a map is, I think, one of the biggest advantages you get by using in-platform. So we're going to call this one Process Optimization Academy. And then we can give it a short description. This is for the first Academy session. You can configure goals that you align to these projects if you have organizational goals. Templates is something that we'll cover in the future, but you might want to set this up as a template that gets applied when somebody mines from, let's say, a performance analytics metric. But that's a future topic for a future session. Here, you're going to select a table. Now, you can choose a table or a different data source. For those that are familiar of what we call report sources, where you've got some pre-configured filters that you use over and over again, you can set those up here as a data source. And then I can come in here and I'm going to say, I want to use the incident table because that's where I know I have my demo data. And then typically best practice is you want to start mining closed records, things that have completed their process. It's just the best practice. You don't have to do that. That's typically how we guide folks. And if I hit preview here, I'm going to see that I get about 30,000 incidents that match or that have been closed. Now, another best practice, and something that often comes up in conversation, is how much data can I mine? Really, there is no boundary, upper or lower, that you would want to. Some people kind of go back to the predictive intelligence guidance that we used to give, let's say, hey, for predictive intelligence classification model, you want to have a minimum of 30,000 records. That doesn't exist here. What you really need is to get an understanding of what would be a relevant set of data for you to mine for the given workflow or process that you're focused on. Is it a month's worth of data? Is it 2 months? Is it a week? Really, it's what is relevant for you. We don't care in terms of volume. Now, I would say, because you want to be looking at processes as they exist in the current state, usually what we guide people to is, let's just take the last month's worth of data. So tickets that have closed in the last 30 days is a nice starting point. And now this is demo data. So when I hit preview, I'm going to have 0 records. So I'm going to get rid of that filter, but that's kind of a best practice guidance. The other thing that you can do here is you can come and say, you can start linking these to related tables. So for example, if I wanted to start filtering and just look at tasks or SLAs that have been breached, I can come in here and I can say, I want to use this related table to say, actually, I should do SLA, I think. SLA task. And on this table, I want the records that are, so SLA task is attached to incident, right? And if I look for breached, and we'll say has breached is true. So now I want to start mining my incidents that have closed, but also they have an SLA's task that is breached. So you have that ability to start working with related tables as well inside of here. And those of you familiar with the condition builder on the platform probably already knew that was possible. Once I set up the data that I want to use, in this case, I want to get back to my 29,000. I'm going to save this. And then really, we only have to do one more thing to get going. And that's add our activity definition. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say new. And I'm going to add the most common one that you're going to add from an activity definition perspective is state. And I'm going to say add an initial activity. So it'll start with when the record was created and make sure that we capture that data as well. And we'll hit submit. At this point, we could be done. We could start mining right now. But I want to show you a couple of other things. We'll add one more activity definition. In this case, let's add our assignment group. And then from an assignment group perspective, I might want to group those activities. I could link an additional process here. So if this was, let's say, a change was created, I can come in here and maybe I want to kind of link that process. So from the process map, you can look at it'll mine the change path as well for the incidents linked from here. We won't do that today. We'll just hit submit. And then let's create a couple of breakdowns, some additional filters that'll show up on the map. So I'll come here to my breakdown definition, hit new. And we'll click on select and we'll add, let's say, category as a breakdown. And we'll add one more. Remember, channel is one of the more popular ones. So let's add channel or contact type, some might call it. that's it. We're good. If I wanted to configure some additional tables to link to this, I could do that here with child definitions. If I wanted to configure who can see this process map, I would do that here. And then I've got some versioning and logging data that would show up as well. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click Generate Model Sample. And this is something best practice every time you're generating your model for the first time. This is just going to take a subset of the first 3,600 records, or a subset of 3,600 records to mine. In interest of time here today, I think that's the best for us as well. And this usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes. So while this runs, I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to look at some of the questions that we've got, and we'll answer some of these. Question from Phil: are the KPIs used on the workspace defined just like any other KPI in the platform, or are they defined special just for PO? Great question. So the KPIs that you saw on that summary and insights page, what those are standard performance analytics, key performance indicators, and you would define them just like you would any other KPI on the platform, or performance analytics metric on the platform. By default, we have inside of that content pack I was talking about set up that incident resolution one, or resolution times and first call resolution rate as the metrics for anytime you're looking at the incident process. But that is configurable. You would use the UI builder interface to adjust those KPIs, or put new ones in there, or add additional KPIs. That page is configurable via the UI builder. And then remember the safe harbor slide, we're working to make that easier for you to configure moving forward, and a little bit more flexible as well. Those are things that are on our roadmap for sure. Now the next question here, you'll see that my mining is already finished, so that's a good thing. So next question is about kind of setting thresholds or alerts to notify when something is out of bounds or really subjective based on your analysis. So one of the things that's important to remember is there's those finding cards are the things that we would use to potentially notify people that things are out of bounds, right? So your rules in terms of things conforming are going to be different than other folks. We've provided some of those things that are common out of the box, but you have the ability to create your own finding cards to help you guide people to things that are out of bounds. So that's one way to go about it. And then there's a question here around setting up the process optimization for custom tables as well. So good question. And this is, again, safe harbor. So today, this is focused on ITSM and CSM, but there's no technical limitation for you to be able to use it against custom tables that you've created on the platform. It's more of a licensing boundary today, but that is something that we're working to address and is scheduled to be addressed in the Tokyo release, where we will then open this up for you to use process optimization against HR related tables, as well as tables created via App Engine or creator workflows. Again, safe harbor. Our goal is to make process optimization available to all workflows that are running on the platform. It's just, we have to go through some gates here at ServiceNow to kind of make it available that way. But that's our goal. And as I said, in Tokyo, the plan is to add HR and creator workflows to this capability. So as you saw, by the way, we were answering questions. This completed, and I can immediately now go to the Workbench for that data that we set up. So that's what it takes. And like I said, one of the things that I think is a huge advantage of taking an in-platform approach to using in-platform process mining is the ease of use from a data perspective, right? We know our data. All we did there is configured a couple of fields in a form. We didn't need to go to a data and analytics team or any of those types of things. We just said, this is the table that I want. Here's the activities that I want mine. And within a matter of minutes, I now have my process mapped, and I can start doing all the things that you saw me do before in terms of analyzing the data. It's that straightforward, which is kind of why I wanted to start here today with, instead of diving into all the different analytical capabilities inside of the Analyst Workbench, just showing you what it takes to get started, because you have the right to turn this on in your subprod instance and mine up to 4,000 records today with just kind of as a trial or try it out. So in terms of what do we do next now? First thing I'll say is, now that you know how to do it and how easy it is to set up and run and mine, I would suggest next steps. There is a Process Optimizations Essentials course that's available. It's self-paced on the Now Learning site. So go to the Now Learning site. Takes about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how fast you read and click through some of the screens that are there. But it's on demand, no cost, Process Optimization Essentials. It'll get you all the information that you need above and beyond what we covered here today. Then in your subprod environment, you need to activate a couple of plugins. Process Optimization is the main plugin. And then we've got content packs for ITSM, CSM, telco, and financial services. For most of you, it's probably going to be beneficial to turn on the ITSM Process Optimization Content Pack or the CSM Optimization Content Pack. But you activate those two plugins and you can do what I just did in a matter of a few minutes and start seeing your data mapped in a way that you've most likely not seen it mapped before. A couple of other resources that I think are important to call out for you. Many of you probably found this session via our process optimization community forum, but if you go to community.servicenow.com, there is a process optimization forum that has a lot of information in terms of getting started. I mentioned those common inefficiencies that we've seen. They're all listed out up there. There's a process optimization FAQ that's got a lot of answers on that page and also links to other content. So this recording, we went through a lot of the stuff that we would typically go through in an initial conversation with somebody to help them understand what process mining on the platform is. But we also have this recorded in other places. So there's an overview presentation and demo recorded out there if you wanted to share this information with others inside of your organization. So lots of other resources that are out there. Most of them you can get to from that process optimization community. All right, at this point, we went through a lot of stuff, but let's open it up for some additional questions. So if there's anything that you want to ask about what we covered here today, please put it in the chat, or if you feel comfortable coming off mute to ask, go right ahead. Don't all jump at once.
Hey, this is Lee. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lee.
Hey, so how soon would you do this after you install ITSM or CSM for the very first time? Would you do it within 30 days? I guess you could crank this thing up, right?
Yeah, so that's a very common question, and I think it's a very good one. And the way that I always think about it is how soon is too soon to know that you have an opportunity to do better? Because we used to have this question comes up a lot with performance analytics as well. It's like, well, when do you start? Well, with metrics, one of the things is you want to start thinking about what metrics are important to you in parallel as you start to implement. But with this is, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month. But as soon as you start using the system for real and you have actual users creating tickets of some sort, whether they be incidents or cases, you're going to want to start taking a look at how people are conforming to the process. Where are they veering off? Where do we see a bottleneck? Because the earlier you can catch those things, the earlier you can start making tweaks to whether it be your intake channel or whether it be how you're routing some of the cases. To me, I think weeks is probably the best way to answer that, and weeks can equal a month. Did that help, Lee?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else got some questions? Any thoughts or any ideas for topics you want to cover in future sessions? I'll just please keep asking questions, but I will bring up this screen here as you're thinking about your questions. So today, really what I wanted to make sure that we got started with kind of having you see that ease of use and what it takes to create a model, because I think now that you all have this access to the video, you can go home or maybe right in the desk you're sitting in right now, and kind of turn on process optimization and try to mine your data. And then for the next session in 2 weeks, I thought we'd spend more time on some of the different analytical capabilities in terms of the process map itself and navigating that, bottleneck analysis, variation analysis, root cause, some of those findings. So all the different ways that you can interpret the data and find opportunities, we'd spend time on that. And then as August rolls around, we could talk. I have a session on here in terms of what's coming in the Tokyo release, so you get some visibility into kind of some of the improvements that we've making. And there's some really powerful things that we're doing from an end-to-end workflow perspective and getting you visibility into processes like, let's say, HR onboarding that have several subtests that are often combined with that. And then we'll talk about, I've got a session specifically on those finding rules. So as somebody was asking one of the questions in terms of, hey, can you set control limits and thresholds and alerts and notifications? Most of that today is done, excuse me, as part of those finding rules. But of course, I'm interested to talk more about that topic with you to understand exactly what you're trying to get to from an experience perspective, because one of the things about these sessions is they're also I hope to get some input from you in terms of things that we might not have thought of from a product perspective that we can use to enhance it. And then lastly, something that we're hearing more and more is people interested in starting or spinning up, establishing a process mining center of excellence. So we've done that here at ServiceNow ourselves, and other customers are starting to do that. So we've got some thoughts that we want to share around how we've done it and how we're seeing others do it. So those are kind of what we have from a roadmap perspective in terms of these sessions that will happen every other Friday. All right, I hope I gave you some time to think of some additional questions. Anybody else got any other questions before we wrap up here today? All right. So last thing, this Academy for Process Optimization, this, we stole this concept from some other great academies that exist out there. And if you didn't know that they existed, there's an Academy session that's just for the platform itself and capabilities in the platform, a Virtual Agent Academy, the granddaddy of them all, the Platform Analytics Academy, as well as a Mobile Academy. So there's other sessions just like this that are out there for you if you're interested in those other topics. And like this is the Process Optimization Academy. Again, coming back to the quote we started with, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Hopefully now you know a little bit more and you'll take the opportunity to try this out. Try this out on your own. If you've got questions that we didn't answer here today, use the community forum. I monitor that on a daily basis, and I will answer your question as quickly as possible. That's out there, and that's where you would go to get some additional information and register for future sessions. With that, one last chance for questions before we call it a day. Awesome. Well, then I thank everyone for their time. And look forward to seeing you back here on future Process Optimization Academy sessions.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much, Dan. Take care.